300 years ago, Edward Teach was the most famous and feared pirate in the world. Except for Captain Jack Sparrow from the Pirates of the Caribbean movies, he's probably still the most famous pirate today.
He was called Blackbeard and known as the Fury of Hell. And you've got to hear what happened to his head.
Let's dig into this. We don't know a lot about Blackbeard, and what we think we know of him, and all of the pirates of the age, came mostly from a single source, a book that was published shortly after Blackbeard's death. In 1724, A General History of the Robberies and Murders of the Most Notorious Pirates by Captain Charles Johnson was published in London. This book was hugely popular and had information on many different pirates and wonderful tales of adventures and outlandish activities. The detailed descriptions have created the pirate as we know him and her to this day.
Everybody knows Edward Teach as Blackbeard's real name. But is it? His name may have been Edward Thatch, Thack, or Theach. Some have even said it was Drummond. Many pirates use pseudonyms to protect their family name, so they may never know Blackbeard's real name, even if he claimed to be Edward Teach.
We also don't know his date of birth. When Blackbeard was killed in 1718, it was estimated that he was somewhere between 35 and 40 years old. This estimation is where we have gotten his birth year of 1680 from. It was said he was born in Bristol, England, but extensive searches for records of his birth over the years have not produced anything. The only thing we can say for sure is Blackbeard could read and write, which would indicate he was from a well-to-do family.
The first time Blackbeard appears in historical record is 1716, and he was killed in 1718. Quite a short amount of time to become so infamous.
Blackbeard created an image for himself. He didn't like violence, so his image was carefully crafted to terrify those he came across, who would then spread the word that Blackbeard was not someone you wanted to mess with. This is a brilliant strategy that helped him to capture many ships with as little violence as possible. In fact, there is no evidence Blackbeard killed anyone, or even ordered anyone to be killed, before his final battle.
He was described as tall and lean with a very black beard, which he wore very long. He twisted ribbons and string and animal tails in his beard, and would stick lighted matches or fuses under his hat and around his face, so it would look like he had a ring of smoke and fire around his head. He was said to be wild-eyed and fierce-looking. He wore knee-high boots, a wide-brimmed hat, and a long coat. In battle, he is said to have worn a sling over his shoulder with multiple pistols hanging in holsters. His crew was equally terrifying. They were equipped with muskets and cutlasses. Blackbeard's flag was a simple skull on a black background, said to be flown along a blood-red flag. Later descriptions of the Devil's Skeleton flag are not accurate and first appear in a magazine article from 1912.
In early October of 1717, Blackbeard began a blockade of ports on the east coast of the U.S. The harbor of New York, port of Philadelphia, and Chesapeake Bay were targeted, and in just a couple of weeks of pirating, Blackbeard captured more than 15 ships. He cut the masts and anchors from ships, leaving the crew to drift or run aground. He threw cargo he didn't want into the sea. By the time sailors came into port and reported these raids to the authorities, Blackbeard was on his way back to the Caribbean, and he was the most famous and feared pirate in the world.
On the way back to home port, Blackbeard came across the French ship La Concorde in the open ocean. The crew of the ship had been ravaged by scurvy and disease and could not outrun Blackbeard's ship. Le Concorde gave up without a fight. The crew was given the smallest of Blackbeard's ships to return to port. Blackbeard and his crew took the 40-gun ship and renamed her as the Queen Anne's Revenge.
Through 1717 and 1718, Blackbeard's fleet is said to have captured as many as 9 more ships or sloops and looted an additional 4 ships before heading to South Carolina, where things got really interesting. Blackbeard anchored his ship near the Charleston Bar, a sandbar of shoals off the coast. In 1 week, 9 vessels were stopped and emptied of anything of value. One of these ships was carrying important citizens who were kept prisoner below decks for hours. Then Blackbeard brought the prisoners out, told them that his fleet needed medical supplies, and his crew would burn the ships, execute the prisoners, and send their heads to the governor of Carolina if they didn't get them. He sent 2 pirates with a prisoner to deliver his demands. And then he waited.
The supplies didn't arrive by the date Blackbeard had given, but they arrived eventually. The reason for the delay? The 2 pirates sent with the prisoner were busy drinking. Blackbeard kept his word and released all the prisoners and the ship, although he kept all the valuables and even some of the clothes the prisoners had been wearing.
Sailors in Blackbeard's day would have been exposed to diseases like scurvy and dysentery, among others, so Blackbeard may have had quite a list of medications, but it said the medicine needed most was mercury, the treatment at the time for syphilis.
With their medical supplies on board, it was time to get back to work. Or was it? Blackbeard had heard of the offer of the royal pardon of pirates turning themselves in by the beginning of September 1718. The offer included immunity from crimes committed by a certain date. Unfortunately for Blackbeard, the South Carolina adventure fell after the cutoff. This meant Blackbeard and his crew could be hanged for those crimes if they decided to apply for the pardon.
For some reason, Blackbeard decided he would try anyway. Whether he told his crew, we don't know. The fleet sailed north to Beaufort Inlet, North Carolina, supposedly to scrape the ships' hulls for better sailing. Instead, all but 2 of the ships in the fleet ended up grounded on sandbars and damaged. Blackbeard stranded some of his crew and sailed off on one of the remaining ships to Bath, North Carolina, and amazingly, received his pardon.
Blackbeard settled in Bath. He had a home a short distance from the governor who had granted his pardon. It is said by many that he married Mary Ormond, the daughter of a plantation owner, although this cannot be confirmed. Life as a landlubber seems to have been too boring, and soon the governor gave Blackbeard permission to sail to St. Thomas and seek a commission as a privateer. Blackbeard quickly fell back into his old pirate ways.
A short time later, Blackbeard, Calico Jack, and other famous pirates spent several days on Ocracoke Island, a favorite pirate hangout. No one knows if this was some kind of reunion, a meeting, or just a coincidence, but word got out that a large number of pirates were on the island. The governor of Pennsylvania sent ships to capture the pirates. The governor of Virginia, Alexander Spotswood, decided he would take Blackbeard down. He personally financed the mission, and ships and men went looking for Blackbeard.
The last battle of Blackbeard has been written about and argued for many years. It is a long story of ships maneuvering within a small inlet to gain advantage with cannons and guns. They try to run each other aground in the shallows and sandbars. And when Blackbeard's ship got close enough for the crew to board the deck of the Royal Navy sloop Jane, paid for by the governor of Virginia, there was hand-to-hand combat. Eyewitness accounts say the whole battle only took about an hour, And at the end, Blackbeard and between 9 and 11 other pirates lay dead on the deck of the Jane. One account of Blackbeard's death says he was on the Jane fighting with his cutlass when he found himself surrounded by the Jane's crew and facing its captain. The captain went for his gun, and Blackbeard moved in. But he was slashed in the neck by a crew member. He was then attacked and killed by several more crew of the Jane. The captain stated Blackbeard had been shot 5 times and cut about 20 times. His head was cut off and attached to the bowsprit of the Jane. His body was thrown overboard.
When the Jane returned to Virginia, Blackbeard's head was turned over to Governor Spotswood. Spotswood had it mounted on a pole and placed it somewhere at Hampton Roads, Virginia, to warn other pirates. The spot where the skull was supposedly placed is called Blackbeard's Point. Eventually the skull disappeared, and it may have had quite an interesting journey over the past 300 years, although none of the stories can be proven.
One story goes like this. The skull ended up in a tavern in either Williamsburg or Alexandria, Virginia, or both, or first one and then the other. Anyway, supposedly the tavern owner had it lined with silver and dared his customers to drink from it. Then in the 1950s, it showed up in the collection of Mr. Edward Snow, a maritime historian and author who did many public speaking engagements with Blackbeard, or his head. When Mr. Snow died, his wife gifted the collection, including the skull, to the Peabody Essex Museum in Salem, Massachusetts. The museum lent the skull out once for exhibit in 1997 and 1998, but it is not on display, and it may not even be Blackbeard's. There is no way to know at this point.
Of course, there are other stories, like the one that says Blackbeard's skull was stolen, covered in silver, engraved with the words "Death to Spotswood," and used as a pirate drinking vessel. Or the one that says that the Freemasons use it in their initiation ceremony. Or the one that says secret college fraternities do the same thing. Of course, none of these can be proven, but the legend of Blackbeard's skull is almost as interesting as the legend of Blackbeard himself.
Blackbeard's ship, the Queen Anne's Revenge, was discovered in 1996. It is one of the only confirmed pirate shipwrecks in the world to be scientifically studied. And the finds are amazing. Massive cannons, cannonballs, grenades, muskets, fragments of books, remains of food, and a syringe used for the mercury cure are among the over 400,000 artifacts found. They all add to the story and the legend of the most famous and feared pirate of them all, Blackbeard, the Fury of Hell.
We really hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe.
And we'll see you on the next one, matey.